Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Streaming Alchemy Show. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two USB cameras that are available from PTZOptics. The first one is their new Webcam 80, which is a pretty impressive small package. That's the one we have right here. Uh, the second one is their HuddleCamHD 3X. Now, this camera is about 2 years old, but it was probably one of the most budget-friendly PTZ cameras that we saw in the market. So we think doing a comparison between these two cameras makes a lot of sense. So before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that we will be accepting call-ins on the show. So if you'd like to join us on air, ask a question, share your own experiences using different types of budget-friendly cameras, we certainly would love to hear from you. So please, you can connect to us at the link below. Uh, Also, anybody who wants to, say hello in the comments, Brad, how are you? So we already have our first commentist. So that's Brad. He's one of our loyal regulars. So thank you, Brad, for joining us. So uh, to get started, I'd like to first look at the PTZ Optics Webcam 80. Now this camera here is it's a standard webcam footprint and standard webcam connectivity, just a cable attached in the back, USB plug right into your computer. But that's probably where the standard webcam sort of ends and the real camera piece of this begins. So let's just talk about the hardware to start. So for this camera, it is a 2.8 millimeter native focal range, focal length. And that, if you remember, we talked about how those translate to full frame. So this would be a full frame equivalent of 14 millimeter, which is a nice wide field of view, but something that when it's very close to you on a desk, which is really what these webcams are designed for, uh, it gives you a perfect view of whoever is in front of it and some of the areas surrounding them. So it's really great as a up close camera in that regard. Uh, the other thing about it that's really exciting is that the it has an f1.8 as its f-stop, and that is really good in such a small camera with a small lens assembly. So again, this camera not only gives you a great field of view, but will do really well in any type of lower light situation, something where you're just using office lights. So Bill Corky, Bill, good to see you again. Uh, so the other thing though is that internally, this camera has a whole host of controls that are available for it. So one of the things that PTZ Optics did with this camera is they provide the same types of granular image and color control that they do in their larger cameras. And they do it now through an application you can download. Uh, Normally, if you were to deal with most cameras that have sort of settings that are embedded in the camera, you would connect to them through a web browser. But because this is such a small footprint and because it is such a budget-friendly camera, I mean, this camera is lists for less than $100 and it's available in most places for under $90. So definitely fits in a very nice space in the market price-wise. Uh, J.S. Gilbert, uh, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you saying hello in the comment section here. So, if you would look at most cameras, they would normally be available through a web browser. But for here, you have to download this application off the PTZ Optics website. It's called their Webcam OSD, on-screen display menu tool. And this camera has a full range of controls that are accessible using this tool. So all you have to do on the PTZ Optics site is go to Resources, Downloads, which is the page we're at, and you should be good. So when you get that application, let me switch this here. Uh, zoom this in. Give me a second here. And okay, I'll close one of these. So what we have here, if you can see it, is a small tool that allows you to sort of do all the things you would do through a little joystick that you could have on a normal camera. And this will give you sort of an up, down, left, right, enter, and back. But the way you do this is you start by going into open, close. And you see here, if you look along this side right over here, this is the on-screen menu that's coming right from the camera. So, JS, the maximum resolution of this camera, JS Gilbert was asking what the maximum resolution is. The maximum resolution of this camera is 1920 by 1080 30p. So it gives you, a very high quality, high resolution, and reasonably high frame rate for a webcam class camera. So everything on this menu is the same things you would expect if you were looking at a normal camera. So right now I'm talking into the webcam itself, so this will give you a sense of the image quality, and we can go into this in a bit more detail later. But so what you have here is exposure and color, which give you the ability to sort of control the brightness and then the color composition, everything you'd probably want to balance color to make it work with other cameras or to get a specific look if that's what you're going for using this camera. Uh, yeah, Jay Skidwood just commented that for $89, this is something he can't complain about. That's absolutely true. I think price point. This is a great fit for a lot of people as a second camera or as one of their primary cameras if they're getting started. Definitely a high value proposition. So it has exposure and color, which will give you those things that sort of tone the image how you'd like it to look. And it also has a lot of image controls as well, which give you more of the low level capabilities for sort of matching up with the overall lighting look you want to get. Uh, it also has noise reduction, something I won't go into, but does 2D and 3D noise reduction. So you get both of those in there, which help give you a sharper image. And then it also has a settings panel, which we'll come into because there's something really interesting in this camera hidden there. So if we start with exposure, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to click. There's a small enter button on the control pad we had. And so this gives you the ability to control a range of things related to exposure. So the first is the mode, which I won't try to change things on here because it'll screw up the image that we're working with here. But in it gives you manual control, it gives you auto exposure, uh, it gives you the ability to set it up at very specific at very specific levels that relate to aperture priority or shutter priority. So a lot of things baked into this that you'd expect to see in a normal camera, and this is all now in a webcam. The next option down is called DRC strength, and what DRC is, this is really really pretty cool here. It allows you to do dynamic range control at both the top end and the bottom end. So what you're effectively doing is you're doing something of an S curve where you can brighten the darkest parts of an image and darken the brightest parts of an image to sort of contain everything within the dynamic range that's afforded by the camera mechanics. And again, that's something that's really great. I mean, basically having visual curves that you can apply into your camera settings on a webcam is phenomenal. The other thing down is exposure. Uh, Totally blown away by the exposure. Exposure goes for everything from 1/100th of a second on your exposure. It's really your shutter speed that they're talking about here. Uh, so all the way up to 1/10,000th of a second. Now, I'm not sure it's even possible to get enough light onto this camera for 1/10,000th of a second shutter speed. But again, the fact it's in here and it gives you those levels of control is impressive. The other thing it has is it has gain control. So gain gives you the ability to brighten or darken an image. This would be when we've talked about cameras in the past. This would be basically like the ISO image that you would get with a camera. So you can raise the brightness of an image if it's too dark, but you're also raising the noise level. So the more gain that you add, uh, the clearer the image from brightness, but also the noisier the image is going to get. And I know that JS would just asked the question about how it works in low light. Uh, the fact that it's got an f1.8 means that the the sensitivity, the amount of light actually reaching the sensor is going to be pretty high. We've worked with this in lower light settings as well. We don't have it set up here, in the studio for this, but it's definitely very, very capable in low light. And yeah, the gain does introduce noise, so you're going to deal with that as sort of one of the artifacts of anything uh, that amplifies a signal. You only have so much signal to deal with, and everything else you're going to amplify is going to be noise. But it is not a, it's not objectionable, and I think that's a fair statement. You will see it. You can tell the difference between this type of camera and much more expensive cameras. But I think the quality of the image overall is something that is a real value for almost anybody that's looking at cameras in this range. So let me jump back to the next level, which is color, and really interesting things in the color side. So it has a range of white balance settings. So you can go in there and set it for, right now we just have it set for auto, but you can go, daylight and tungsten. You can also set it manually to specific color temperatures. So all that stuff we talked about where, you can see the different hues that the white light produces based on the temperature of the light. You can adjust for anything in between. So it's really incredibly flexible here for dialing in sort of a good strong color match with whatever your light source is. Uh, it also has sensitivity for the white balance. So when you set this to auto, this is going to tell you how quickly, how radically it's going to adjust to changes in the lighting. And well, this probably isn't that important if you're using this in a indoor setting with controlled light. It could be if you're doing something over time where you have light coming in from a window and that light could change over time. Again, having it be able to adjust dynamically and to do that quickly is something that's really valuable for this type of camera. The other thing now is something really subtle with color control. It has RG tuning and BG tuning. And so what these two tunings give you are the ability to adjust the red green balance and then also the blue and green balance. So you effectively have RGB level controls. I can adjust how much red relative to green and how much blue relative to green are in the color image that I generate out of this webcam. So definitely really cool for color matching if you want to do things where you color match other cameras. So say you had a PTZOptics 20X Zcam or one of their PTZ cameras, uh, you could take and match color between this webcam and those cameras and do it in a way that it looked very natural. So this level of control I think is pretty impressive for something at this price point. The the last thing on here is saturation. So you can raise or lower the amount of color that's actually in an image, and it gives you a lot of range area. I think you can have over 200% saturation, all the way down to effectively turning this into a desaturated image. So a lot there that you can do. So if we jump back and look at the image controls, uh, this now talks about some of the standard ones you're used to seeing, which would be like luminance, which is brightness, contrast, and sharpness. So those are things that you traditionally see. But it also has gamma control, which this combined with the curve on the exposure that you have, it now gives you a lot of control of the overall way an image can look from the darkness, lightness, contrast side of your image composition. So something really great here. Uh, there has something called style, which I don't have anything. This seems to be more of an organic type of thing, but it gives you different types of overall looks. that you can bake into this. I don't want to go through them because it will change all the settings that we dialed in for this show on it, but it gives you a very simple way to try to get a look out of the camera without having to dive in and do individual tweaks. So the other thing, which you may have noticed, is there is a horizontal and a vertical flip up here. So let me just, so what this will let you do is this will let you mount the camera now, say upside down, and you can flip it horizontally and vertically. So you can still control the image if you want to do something like a ceiling mount pointing down on a desk, if you want to use this as an overhead cam in a production. Uh, so, Walter, thank you for joining us. It's good to see you here. So, again, a lot of flexibility, not just with the controls, but also with the way you can now place the camera. So, something that I thought was pretty impressive there. But the reason this is so interesting is something that's buried down in settings. This camera, built in, has what they call an electronic PTZ. I have the ability to have this zoom in, crop and scale, uh, and that's something that I think is, again, in a webcam. It sort of blows your mind when you think about this. You have the ability to do virtual PTZs and control the zoom limit. So how far in do I let the camera go when I'm doing PTZ control? So what I'm going to do here is let's switch back to this, and we're probably done with everything we'd want to see in the menu. But let me just dive in here a bit and show you what you get from the PTZ side. So this works like a standard PTZ camera to vMix. So let me just show you how I set this up. So if you go in here, it's a UVC PTZ. That's the setting that you would use inside uh, vMix to set up this camera. Then you can connect and do everything as if it were any one of the more expensive PTZs you could have. You have, so in this case here, let me just show you, I have these three presets here. So this one, oh, it's hunting focus a bit there. So this is one that's sort of a closer, close to medium. And this one is probably a much, much closer shot now. So I think I may be a little off on the focus. But this is something that I think you can see, this is still the same image that you had before. So if you switch to this full screen, uh, what you can see in this image is that the quality is still there. This holds up very well because now I've taken this camera and I'm zoomed in probably 3 times on this camera, and you still, if you look at this image, the quality of the overall, view you get is really strong. Not a lot of noise in here, not a lot of artifacting. So again, really, really impressive for, a camera like this to have these types of controls in there. And you can do everything you would do with a normal PTZ with bounce around. So it's sort of virtualized the PTZ, the electronic PTZ, now built into the camera. So don't know how they did it, but they baked a lot into this little footprint thing. I agree with you, Brad. It is really amazing what's in this camera. So I think this is probably a good look at the webcam 80 that is available. So let's take a look though at another USB based camera that is offered by PTZOptics, which is their HuddleCam 3X. And so this camera, the HuddleCam 3X, is probably, just under $300. And I thought if you wanted something beyond what the virtual PTZ could do here, but still in a cost-effective thing, I think what you have here is probably, a reasonable next step for this. So let me switch to that as an image so you can. Okay, so this gives you a sense of the two images. So this camera is right down here. So I think that as you look at this camera is a 3mm to 10mm native, which translates roughly to I'm trying to remember exactly. So I had it here. So it's like a 12 millimeter field of view uh, of 82. So this would be a 12 millimeter at the wide, which is again very wide, even wider than you can get with the PTZOptics webcam. And it's also though goes into a 36, which is really really reasonable. Ryan, thanks for joining us. Yeah, there will be some audio latency. We haven't dialed this in around the audio here in the studio. So we from looking at this, we're thinking there's probably in the 3 to 4 frame that you'd have to dial in if you were using this for uh, audio. But understand that if you're something I wouldn't recommend. If you're taking the audio from the camera itself, that would be something that shouldn't be an issue. But I'll say it right now. I don't care how good any webcam is. I would never use it as your source of audio. Get a mic, get something else, and do the dial-in. But you're right, Ryan. The dial-in between the audio and the video, there is real latency when you're going through USB. There's just a lot more hops that are coming in here. So, uh, so again, we go from this would be the full frame equivalent if we're looking at the PTZ, the HuddleCam HD 3X. That has a 12 millimeter to like 38, just under 40 millimeter full frame equivalent. And so I think you get a pretty wide range with that. Uh, the the other thing though is that, and this is important because when we first set this up, we were a little surprised. What you don't get is the UVC PTZ control in vMix or anything else. If you want to control the HuddleCam HD, you're going to need to be doing this through uh, a USB to uh, RS-232 adapter with a second cable running into it. So it is a limitation of this. But I think as I go through this, you know, you're going to have to take this camera. It's 2 years old, so you're going to have to take it for sort of what it is in terms of what it can deliver. But it was really designed more for conferencing. So this would be the type of camera that you'd put in, on top of a TV in a Zoom room or something you would have in a corporate space, and that would be how you'd probably want to be thinking about using this typically. So I was just looking at it in the context of what we would do here if we wanted to use it for a video production. So you don't have that direct vMix control, but what you do have, and let me see if I can just call this up here. So they do give you a on-screen remote control that you can use with this, and you also get a remote control that comes with it, actually a fairly big one, that allows you to do everything from the zoom and pans and everything uh, around selecting presets. But the camera itself doesn't allow you to do a whole lot, no way near as much actually as you can do with the PTZOptics webcam camera. So, but I think it's important if you need to have something where you can do different types of, oops, sorry, let me just, if you can do different types of shots where this would be something where, oh, let me see, I'll jump around here this way. So if I go here and I want it to be able to zoom in and do the different things, you have all the different preset shots you can do in this, but you don't have a lot of image control baked into it. So looking at these two cameras, which I think would probably be the two very low cost options you'd have, one native PTZ, the other virtual PTZ, but with a lot of capabilities. The you end up finding that the camera, the PTZ camera really is fairly limited image wise. So if I were to look at these two, my recommendation would be uh, to stick with the virtual webcam capabilities here, unless you needed to physically target different areas in a production that you couldn't cover with just cutting up one image into smaller ones. So Brad, the price point for this camera, it's under $300. So it actually costs a significant amount more. Uh, and again, you do have the ability to do basic sorts of preset controls and jump around. Not a lot of image controls are available here. So it's the sort of thing where, if I were to look at this, I would probably say if you were looking for this, I'd go for two of the PTZOptics webcams and position them around and use that as two cameras before I go with the one PTZ. But again, this is something I think, everybody can choose for themselves, because having a USB-based PTZ camera uh, can be valuable sometimes, especially where you want to just move totally into a different, area of the set to take an image of, or where you want to do close-ups that are looking specifically at a person. So, say I was using both of these in a production, this could be something that you would do in an interview where you put the PTZ uh, and the webcam on top of each other between two guests, use the webcam for the wide shot to bring in both guests, and then switch the PTZ as individual shots for the two individual guest close-up shots. That's something that would be hard to do in using the virtual webcam capabilities. But again, something that I think your mileage may vary. If you have a different design setup, you could do something very, very effective, for about the same price. So for $300, you could use three cameras. But again, keep in mind, because these are USB based, the more cameras you add, you'd probably need to make sure you were using different USB chipsets in here so you didn't run out of bandwidth going in and out of the system. So something to keep in mind when you use USB cameras in general, but also to keep in mind when you sort of compare the two. So let me just do a full shot, if we can, of the HuddleCam, so you can get a sense of what it looks like. So this is it sort of compared to my hand. So it's not a very big unit. Now, if we can get a video from the camera itself so we can see what the image quality is. Okay, let me see. I can send this out. I do a quick play here. So okay, so I think this gives you a sense. So this is a bit color desaturated. So it's something that comes with this, and it's very easy. You can see the blowouts clearly in the sort of the light we have up there. So it doesn't compensate for that, but it's still definitely an acceptable image. But let me show you something in it, which I think as we start to go through the image, let me see if I can just zoom this out and push this over. One of the things you'll see here, if you look at the edge going along here, there's a lot of bow to that. And one of the things that I didn't talk about with the webcam option is that you end up with uh, no real edge compensation, so you get this sort of lens distortion as you go out to the wide side on it. But with the PTZOptics webcam, you basically have a very, very, oops, there, let me switch over to that. You have a very clean image all the way out. So let me see if I can play this. Okay, so if you look here, that you can see some bowing. Let me see if I can take the on-screen display off here. So if you look here, you can see that there is some bowing, but there is actually compensation in the webcam itself designed to try to adjust that edge distortion. Again, just one of the subtle thing that's in there. So okay, Brad just pointed out that there's a 5% off coupon on the Video Guys site for the webcam 80. So that puts it like $85. So again, just another reason I think to to really consider this. But as I said, I think when we look at these things, you really have to look at what you're trying to do with both of these cameras. So I think both had their place, and it's something that would make sense for you if you want that PTZ control. But in terms of image quality, I think the webcam is definitely far superior. So one thing I'd like to show you though is I'd like to show you uh, a dual shot, which is basically both of them coming, one from the webcam and one from a further away PTZ, which should give you a sense of how this camera could stack up in a production where you want to actually have both, you know, webcam and traditional uh, HDMI, SDI, NDI cameras coming in. So the far camera here, the one that I'm pointing to there, that's uh, a NewTek PTZ1 camera that's coming in. Uh, and this is over here is the webcam. And so you can see these shots are basically framed pretty close. So if you wanted to do that, I'm getting this though with this camera basically within 3 feet of me. So if you don't have a lot of space, you can get these wide type of shots using the camera at a very close distance. But I think the other thing you'll notice is that the quality of these two shots are very similar, and the price difference is pretty dramatic. You're talking one camera that costs 20 times what the the other camera cost. So while definitely there are differences and a lot more control options that you have with a full-fledged PTZ, mixing these in a production would not be something that you'd sit there and go, ooh, they suddenly switched to the crappy camera. You actually could get something that would look very good. And if we had, if we were using uh, the webcam as a standard camera in our productions, we would have done color matching to try and make them look more in sync. Uh, but definitely, something to keep in mind if you want to use this as an additional camera to do crowd shots or reaction shots. Definitely something that would be great. The other thing to keep in mind is that you can use a USB camera with things like NewTek's Connect software. They have a Connect free version, which you could actually take this webcam in, put it up in, say, the front of a church, and use it to cover the congregation or cover a musical group uh, over NDI using the Connect software. So lots of different ways you can bring this in and integrate with that. So I think, the sort of to sum this up, I think for the web camera, you get a sharp image. It does have low noise. I think it mixes really well with other cameras. Not a lot of edge distortion given the small size of the lens you're dealing with. So overall, very impressed. Uh, the HuddleCam HD3X, I think it's something that you'd have to have a special use case, specifically where that physical PTZ capability was important to you. Otherwise, from a image quality point of view, I don't think it would be something that you'd probably want to integrate on its own. But combined with the two cameras, you could definitely do some things that are pretty impressive. With just these cameras here, and no other cameras. Uh, so hopefully you found this all useful. Bill, yes, thank you again. It's a lot of fun going through this stuff because I get to explore it with you in some ways. I get to spend the week before each show learning about something that typically we get our hands on and get to put through its paces. So this is a fun week, especially when you find something that you can be as excited about as we are about the webcam 80 here from PTZOptics. So uh, I think that's probably it in terms of everything I want to talk about with these two cameras. So if you have any other questions, still feel free to post them up, or if you want to, you can still call in if you'd like. Happy to talk to anybody that wants to join us here. Uh, the other thing though that I want to remind is that we have the Stream Geeks Summit that's coming up. So this is going to be on November 8th in New York City. So we'll be doing a presentation there on, it's called Live Streaming 101. But it's really, we're going to talk about everything we did to set up this show, and not just gear. I mean, we'll talk about gear. We'll talk about, how we built and, set up the set and all this, the gear we used to switch. But we're also going to talk about some of the process things that go behind starting a show, things you need to think about. And uh, I guess when you think of a show, it's very easy to get lost on the technical side, but there are creative decisions that need to be made. There are editorial decisions that need to be made. And if you want to do a show week after week, there are a lot of things you need to think about in terms of what is the show going to be like and how much time do I need to produce it. So, a lot of subtle things that I think might not be top of mind, but we're going to try to touch on all of those at this. So, I would love to have you join us there. It would definitely be a lot of fun to see you. So, uh, so I think Bill, if you look, the coupon code should be in the it's VGON social. So this is something that would be Stephen Hayward's on social program. So they have a coupon code with them, which is great. So definitely if you're interested, that would be a great coupon code to use. Also, the on if you see me, I'm a big fan of what Stephen's doing with on social. Stephen has really been an inspiration for some of the stuff that I've done, and a big supporter. So uh, definitely, check out his show as well. But for our next show, uh, we're going to be looking at something I think could be interesting. We're going to be looking at controlling on-set signage. So we just have this monitor behind us. Uh, we want to do more with our set, and this is where what got us starting to think about, how would you control, multiple monitors on set. So we're going to be talking about that, but using NDI and OBS. OBS is one of those tools that if you don't have it, I don't care like what camp you're in. We're TriCaster users, and we love the TriCaster, but OBS is one of those things that you definitely want to have in your toolkit. It does so much, and I think we'll cover a lot of that stuff in detail on our next show. So thanks everybody for joining us. I sincerely appreciate the engagement and everybody that takes the time out on their Friday to spend some time with us here. And have a great week. So until next week, take care. Bye.